To Diane Roark.
Well, you heard this morning that land use regulations are really to control you, not to control land. I'm here to tell you that the legislation since 9/11 that allows the National Security Agency to collect information on you is really about population control. It's about controlling you, every one of us. We are subjected to surveillance that is so intrusive, that permeates everything in our life, literally everything in our life, that it would be unimaginable to our founders. Nothing you do is assuredly private. Nothing you do is safe. The government lies, it misleads, it blocks the
Slide the podium over.
Let's touch the table. Sorry.
No, the podium.
There we go.
There you go. There we go.
I did. Okay. The government lies and misleads us. It blocks the knowledge of regular courts about what they're doing. It blocks your knowledge. This is corruption. And we are now, 12 and a half years later, thoroughly corrupted. All three branches of government.
That's right. Amen. Amen.
So let me tell you a little bit about where I came from. I am from outside Sublimity. I grew up on a farm out there. I was in international relations, went back to Washington, D.C., went to school there, became employed there, first at the Department of Energy in the international section, secondly in the Department of Defense in both strategic buildup and in START policy to draw down strategic weapons. And then I went to the National Security Council staff at the White House in the intelligence section. Finally, I ended up at the House Intelligence Committee for the last 17 years of my career. I was on the Republican staff there and handled a lot of different accounts until the Republicans took over, at which time I got specialized accounts, first primarily the National Reconnaissance Office, which is the satellite builder, and secondly, the National Security Agency for the last 5 years of my tenure there. I retired in April of 2002, but before I retired, I found out about what they call the program. The program that was doing dragnet domestic surveillance. And they want you to think it's only about phone records, about billing records, but it's not. It's about a lot of different things. It's about content. It was about content from the beginning, and they have lied through their teeth about this. As the program grew older, it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is under both Bush and his successor, Obama. I know a lot of people reflexively want to defend Bush, and I think Bush intended originally to have this used against counterterrorism. But, you know, power tends to corrupt,
right.
And this kind of power tends to corrupt absolutely. It is now primarily used against domestic population. And the primary recipient of this data is the FBI. The data is now also being used for other domestic criminal cases. It starts, as usual, with the Drug Enforcement Agency and then fans out to local police and others. So let's just go down the list here, and I'll tell you a few of the things of yours that they are collecting. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is what Snowden has revealed, what has happened since I left. Your land phone is being collected on. It's your cell phone. It's your email. It's your Skype. It's your chats. It's your webcams. It's your social media. It's all your encrypted data. If you were doing like a good citizen should and protecting yourself from identity theft, it's your encrypted data. And the encrypted data they will retain indefinitely in case they ever want to decrypt it. So that's basically, if you try to protect yourself, it's a flag that they will collect you specifically. It's your postal mail. There's been testimony that they have an enormous postal mail program with enormous amounts of data, which collects presumably the address and the return address, and probably the date too. It's your business records other than communications. The business records provision in the Patriot Act, the so-called Patriot Act, is so vaguely worded that they can go to any business and get any records that they want. And there's a gag order so that the business owner cannot tell you that your records were collected. This means, and there have been some examples that have been cited, have included medical records, your credit scores, your credit transactions, your bank transactions, and anything else that they want to get, basically. Everything is basically a business or a government. So they can go to anybody and get anything. Presumably that includes all the tracking, the commercial tracking that is done on you by the Google and others. They can probably go get all that as well. And then another category, government records. As I said, everything is either business or government. Julia Angwin of the Wall Street Journal at that time had a front page story in December of 2012 in which she revealed, through the use of FOIAs and by interviewing people who were disgusted with the program, revealed that all your government records are being amalgamated, despite even our really outdated Privacy Act, which banned this, because it was known how much that would reveal about any given person. So all your government records are now being collected together in one place. And if you become a target, there is far more that they can do. They may remotely activate your microphone or your phone as a microphone, and they can remotely activate your webcam on your computer. So it will take pictures of what's going on in your room. There is also, as was recently revealed, a major program for facial recognition in the United States. They're building all these facial profiles so that they can recognize you later. The FBI intends to have 52 million faces on record by the end of 2015. That's next year. What is this? Have any of you seen the movie Minority Report?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is your worst nightmare. We're updating 1984 to the Minority Report. There is no subject, there is no means that is too intrusive for these people. There is no content that is off limits. Their motto, as Glenn Greenwald discussed extensively in his recent book, he is the reporter that has revealed most of the Snowden documents. Their motto is, collect it all. And as they even told me before I left several times, we're going to own the web. And as Greenwald says now, there is no place to hide. There is virtually no way to avoid this surveillance. So the only thing we can do is to demand that it be dropped.
And then who's going to get rid of the records they already have?
Well, to some extent, they're trying to get rid of those records because there are now court cases since the Snowden documents that are actually going someplace, and they're trying to destroy the records, and they've gone to the courts and said that they have to destroy records.
And who's going to be the watchdog to make sure they're destroyed?
Yes, well, the question was, how are we going to be sure they're destroyed? Well, we're going to have to have technology people empowered to actually live in these agencies and have access to all their computers. Otherwise, we're never going to know what they're doing. We can never trust them again.
That's right.
Who trusted them to begin with? Isn't that what the founders taught us?
That's right.
Not to trust government?
Exactly. We're not supposed to trust government, and that's the reason why we have 3 different branches of government for checks and balances. But I'm here to tell you that those checks and balances have failed.
Amen.
And all 3 branches are now corrupted. Yes, sir?
This sort of data collection is something that I've studied at length. There's outside companies that are gaining access to this information. They also have their own data banks. Google, of course, being one of the more prevalent ones that everybody's aware of. This sort of stuff is only going to grow. I'll let y'all know. It's outside of the government now, but it's in control of certain liberals that have an agenda still.
Well, it's definitely true that commercial tracking is a massive endeavor right now. It's done primarily to sell ads, but it is also true that there are data brokers who sell it to anybody who will buy it. And that could include the government. I am most worried about the government because the government has so much control over us. I mean, it's one thing to get ads you don't want. It's another thing to have the EPA come down on you, or the FBI come down on you, or have somebody be angry with you because you take the wrong position on a controversial issue. And how many controversial issues are there? There are so many of them. There are gun rights, there's abortion, there's immigration. I mean, you just go down the list. If there is anyone in our population that doesn't have a position that is controversial, they are basically outside the mainstream. They're completely isolated. So it doesn't matter, and that's another thing. It doesn't matter who is in power. We have to defend the rights of those we disagree with, and we have to defend the rights of criminals so that we can maintain our own rights. That's the way the courts establish these rights.
But as activists, we get out there and be active. What is to stop the government from using that information to persecute us, to stop us from being activists?
Well, the answer is there is nothing to stop them.
Can we let her finish and ask questions later?
Yes, sir.
Jesus Christ.
I think it's quite possible it's used for that. It's certainly being used for criminal uses now. Reuters had a very interesting report that was very well sourced about giving the information to the DEA. But I do believe that the bottom line is that it's going to be used for intimidation and blackmail, as you said, because otherwise there's no point in collecting all this information. It is no longer for counterterrorism. Counterterrorism has been shown to be ineffective for counterterrorism. We have known this. Our intelligence oversight committees have known this, and it has been published, unclassified publication by 5 inspectors general in 2009, July of 2009. Their report was released. It had been demanded by Congress, and they said right in the report that they had gone to the so-called all-source analysts who use every type of intelligence collection, and they had told the 5 IGs that they could not think of a single case in which this had been a significant contributor or an essential contributor. So we have known since 2009 that this was ineffective for its alleged purpose. And following that, we've had other people announce that as well. We've had the president's own panel say the same thing. We've had a district court judge, federal district court judge, say the same thing. That's 3 different sources. So why do we still have the program? why do our Intelligence Committee chairmen insist that we have to have this program for counterterrorism when it hasn't done a single bit of good against counterterrorism? And why hasn't it? Because they're collecting so darn much data they can't make sense of it. They haven't automated the targeting process so that it could bring up a target, which is what they had wanted, to be able to find new targets if we had been infiltrated by foreign terrorists, or by what they call the lone wolf, the domestic lone wolf. That's the only remaining basically argument in favor of this program. There may be a lone wolf out there. Well, I don't know about you, but I'll take my chances with terrorism rather than have the whole country become enslaved.
Amen. That's right. That's right.
Freedom takes courage.
Quick question about why it's just been reported that the IRS and Lois Lerner's records are gone for 2 years. What's your reaction to that when they have data on everything else?
Well, actually, a member of Congress has officially requested that NSA deliver their records on Lois Lerner.
Who is that member of Congress?
I've forgotten the name now. It was late last night when I read that, and I can't remember, but it is a member of Congress, either the House or the Senate. I'm sorry?
Maybe the agencies will all implode.
I think they already have.
Well, I think they, you know, it shows the way it can be used too. But do you remember the Petraeus case?
Yeah.
He was the head of the CIA. He was having an extramarital affair. They found out about it through the FBI's records of email content, not metadata content. All the regional FBI areas have this. I've also recently found out that military intelligence has it. Reserve military intelligence has it. So these databases are everywhere. Another thing is we keep looking at NSA and seeing how many controls they have on this program, and they claim they have wonderful controls, and they don't really. That they just think if they repeat it long enough that people will believe it. But other people, as I said, have these programs. The FBI has never asked what their controls are on access to individuals' information. The CIA has never asked, and they can hunt through these records with no reason whatsoever. They can just simply troll through them and look for what's interesting for them. So we have no controls in the executive branch. Congress has been an embarrassment. Simply an embarrassment. I mean, I came from the House Intelligence Committee. I am just mortified to say I came from the House Intelligence Committee, given the way that they have acted on this, or not, more appropriately, not acted. And furthermore, after the way they threw me to the wolves, no staffer there is going to go out and try and do some real oversight. Yes?
So Diane, so that leads me to a question I had. Do you believe that they are truly being overtly threatened to where, I mean, you've gone through quite a bit, so that members of Congress that start to dig up this stuff, that they are now facing threats from somebody that's quite direct of what is, if you do this, X is going to happen to...
I have my suspicions. I think it's likely that it will be more subtle than an actual threat. I mean, all somebody needs to do is go up to a member and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your son. The trouble he's in." And they'll get the point.
Yeah.
They'll get the point.
Did that also happen to a Supreme Court judge? Absolutely.
Yes, I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, so going through the branches, so Congress is doing absolutely nothing. They're actually being the cheerleaders. They're being more pro-NSA than the administration is, and that may be because they have been in on this from the beginning, and they are defending their lack of oversight. They're defending their decisions. That the administration then comes down to, well, the courts, we have the courts in on this too, and they're doing a wonderful job. Well, in fact, the administration has deliberately kept this out of the federal court system. They have relied on what is called standing. They say that the people suing cannot prove for a fact that they were surveilled, and NSA will not confirm or deny it that they were surveilled. So it's a catch-22. If that fails, they call in state secrets. Yes?
Can you make any comments on the database
I'm sorry, I'm not a expert on that.
People let her finish, for God's sake.
So what they really rely on is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court when they say that the courts are protecting them, the so-called FISC that was established under the FISA legislation. It used to be a good check, but after 9/11, what happened was that the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court became the chief facilitator of this. At first, the judge who was ruling it, who was the only one briefed into it, not the rest of the court, Judge Colleen Kolar-Kotelly, said, well, I can't turn this down because I don't have the authority to rule on constitutional issues under the court's charter. So she went along with it. She even found the famous Baltimore case in which they've used as a precedent to say it's fine. She did that for them. But eventually what the FISC did was to rule on constitutional issues on a massive scale and to shred the Fourth Amendment. What they said was for any individual investigation, the entire country's communications were relevant to that investigation. And so the FBI could go through the entire country's communications. It made a laughingstock of the Constitution. And there are other issues involved there too, but I think I'm just going to skip ahead right now and tell you these tactics, as I said, have trickled down to the FBI. And from the FBI, they have trickled down to local police. There are a number of issues in this regard, but just as an example, these collection schemes that they use for cell phone towers, they collect now entire neighborhoods. Local police do collect on entire neighborhoods to find one phone. So you can never be sure that your cell phone data is not being collected if you have any criminals around in your neighborhood, or anybody they don't like, for that matter. Okay, so what I want to tell you is what they did to me. Because what really irritates me is a lot of people say, well, they can look at my stuff. You know, I have nothing to hide, as if you have something to hide if you object to it. And they will also say, well, you know, they won't find anything. I had nothing to hide. I had not done anything wrong. All I had done was my job. And what I did was I went to, when I found out about it, I wasn't supposed to know about it, but I found out about it, I went to different people and I told them, look, this is an illegal, unconstitutional program. And what we need to do is to either stop it, preferably, or we have to at least restore the civil liberties controls that were deliberately removed from it when it was activated. And I knew about this because I had financed this program. And of course it was meant at that time to collect foreign intelligence. But you always collect a few, you collect some domestic numbers as well because people are abroad or whatever, you know. And so there were provisions to protect them. One of those was to, if you got a U.S. phone number, and U.S. phone numbers are always identifiable, contrary to what they say. If you collect a U.S. phone number, you encrypt the phone number. So until you get a warrant from a judge, an individual warrant, not a group warrant, like the FISA court has been allowing. So you encrypt it. The other thing is there was an automatic tracking so that every access to the database could be perused. So that if anybody improperly accessed somebody's information, they would be in trouble. that was taken off too. So I went around to people and I said, look, at the very minimum, you have to put these controls back on. And I went to all three branches. The judicial branch, I tried to talk to Colleen Kolar-Cotelli in the Fifth Court. I tried to talk to Rehnquist in the Supreme Court. They both refused to see me. In the Congress, I talked to Nancy Pelosi and Porter Goss, who later became the Director of Central Intelligence, but who was at the time the chairman of my committee and my boss. And I wrote them numerous memos, keeping them up to date on what was happening with the program, explaining the entire program to them. Nancy Pelosi, of course, has since said she didn't know anything about it hardly, and the administration didn't tell her much, but I told her a lot. And anyway, so I went to, and they told me I couldn't talk to anybody else on the Hill, but I thought, well, they didn't tell me I couldn't talk to somebody off the Hill. So I went and I talked to people in the administration, including General Michael Hayden twice when he was heading the National Security Agency. And I tried to see David Addington in Vice President Cheney's office, who was actually providing the legal justification for the program and railroading it. He refused to see me also, even though I had sat 6 feet away from him for years in my office. And I went to see the Associate Director for National Intelligence for collection. He listened politely and said nothing. So all of my efforts were futile, and I retired, as I had planned to do. And I moved to Oregon about a year later, after I got my effects in order back east, came out here. Well, I was sure this was going to leak because it was so obviously illegal. And I was really surprised it took 4 years to leak. But one morning I opened up my newspaper, and there it was, big headline in the front. So I thought, well, finally. But only a very small part of it leaked, and only the least objectionable part leaked, which was quite surprising to me. I thought the reporters would get digging in and it would all come out. It didn't, not until Snowden. But the administration was really, really angry about the leak, which was to the New York Times. And they immediately set about with a big team trying to find out who it was who had leaked it. Well, they went around and talked to the relatively few people who were briefed into the program, and my name apparently kept coming up, and they decided that I had leaked it, which was not true. And I got a call from the General Counsel of the House of Representatives, and she said, the FBI wants to know if you will voluntarily cooperate with them in this investigation of the leak. And I said, yes, I will, but I will not tell them who my sources are. I will never tell them that. And I did meet with them when I was back in DC once in February of 2007. And it turned out that this little meeting was an interrogation. It was very hostile. And it became apparent to me at that time, to my great surprise, that I was a target. And I was also quite surprised that they were treating me the way they did, given that I had been from Congress. That they would treat a representative of Congress this way when I was just doing my job. Which made it apparent to me that the House Intelligence Committee had thrown me under the bus. Anyway, after 3 hours, I thought I had been persuasive, and and they were much friendlier, and so my attorney and I had gotten an attorney, fortunately. Never go into anything without an attorney and a note taker, please. You will find out why. But anyway, I thought everything was okay, went home. 6 months later, they raided me at 6 a.m. in the morning. With about 12 to 15 FBI agents, they go through absolutely everything in your house, and for about 5 hours. And they also, at the same time, raided 3 of my sources, and later they raided a 4th. Now, it became apparent to me that they had also done surreptitious search without notifying me, which is illegal, and which they pledged to the Speaker of the House after passage of the Patriot Act that they would not interpret the Patriot Act to allow them to do that. It's also on the FBI's webpage that they will not do that. But I'm here to tell you they did it. And I could tell, the reason I could tell was because they went straight for the documents that dealt with this. They knew right where they were. And the other thing was the warrant had a reference to some of the documents that were that was quite physically accurate, and they could not have known if they hadn't been in my house. So I knew they had done an illegal search. What else did they do to me afterward? Well, I was under electronic surveillance for 5 years. My telephone and computer, both. I had no privacy whatsoever. I was asked to plead guilty to a felony perjury charge 2.5 years after the interview had occurred, in the apparent hope that I would not remember what I had said, because the charge was trumped up. I had said what they said I said, but it was about a different topic. They indicted one of my friends under the Espionage Act, which carried a total of 35 years in prison if he were convicted, basically because he had been a whistleblower. He had gone to the Baltimore Sun and had exposed unclassified information about incredible inefficiencies and waste of money at NSA. And he knew he might lose his job, but he did not think he would be indicted under the Espionage Act. So how did they do this? Well, they did this by perjuring themselves. The NSA swore that 5 documents found in Tom's home were classified. And in fact, what they did was they were unclassified documents, and they retroactively classified them. And then they indicted him for it. And with me, they also later perjured themselves in court, claiming that they had not tried to get me to plea bargain by lying and claiming that I had perjured myself. So in both those cases, they perjured themselves in court. Later, the government also perjured themselves in court to the Supreme Court when a case came before the Supreme Court in order to get them to drop it, and they were successful. They also subpoenaed my older son to a grand jury to testify against me. This appeared to be this was after Tom was indicted, and it appeared to be to try to increase the pressure on me. And they apparently did some other things that I can't prove also. And of course, whenever the date came near for him to appear, they would get an extension, and they just kept doing that to try to drag it out. And I was not able to talk to my son on a telephone or in person for several years because I could have been charged with coaching the witness. And there is another thing they did was that the case was dragged out for years and years and years. It was dragged out so long that Tom's judge, when he was finally freed, because he refused to plea bargain. The effort on all of this, when you say, I didn't do anything so they can't get me, they can get you, because they can drag these cases out so long and cost you so much money that you can no longer resist. And that's what they hoped to do with Tom. They had dragged this case out over 4 years. And then when Tom still refused to plea bargain against, by the way, the advice of all defense attorneys, they all advise you to plea bargain, they dropped all 10 charges against him 4 days before the trial. The judge was so angry, he ripped them up and down for about 30 pages of transcript. And he said, this doesn't pass the smell test.
Who's that judge?
Oh, I'm trying to remember his name. He's a Baltimore District Court judge, and he was a former military officer. And I guess they figured that he would go in their favor, but he did not. And the other thing was the defense had some really good research and proved that all the documents were actually unclassified. So what happened was their case fell apart, but they claimed to the press that it was gray mail, that they were being threatened with revelation of classified information. That was to save face. What else did they do? They refused. After everybody else's case was settled, of the 5 of us, 4 of them were settled. Tom was the last one. The others had all been let free, except me. I was the other one they wanted. They were thinking about indicting me at one time. And so I kept asking them, please give me on paper the status of my case. And they refused to do so until I finally sued them. And they finally said they weren't planning to pursue it anymore. So what does this cost you? Well, it costs you an awful lot. It's not just the stress of having a potential indictment hang over you for 5 years. It's also the money. I mean, in Tom's case, he had to, he spent $80,000. He refinanced his house. He became so broke that he was able to get a public defender to defend him for the rest of the case. And it was very fortunate. They were good public defenders, and that's why they won the case. But in my case, I told my lawyer to do the absolute minimum, and I spent $30,000 doing absolutely almost nothing. When you're being charged $350, $400 an hour, let me tell you, this mounts up fast. And when I told my lawyer that I would not plea bargain, she told me it would cost $1 million to defend me in trial. That's why people cave. John Kiriakou, if any of you have heard about his case, he was a CIA officer who revealed publicly on TV that it was official administration policy to torture people. It was not just a few outliers. It was official administration policy that was not classified properly. It's something the public should have known, but they were furious. The CIA was just furious with him, and they looked ever after for something to get him on. And what happened was he thought that one person had left the CIA and gave a reporter his business card, and it turns out he was still in the CIA. And they got him on that, on release of agents' identities. Before he even went to trial, his lawyer he was $700,000 in debt, and he just gave up. He said, okay, I'll go to prison for 3 years. It's just like I was on deployment abroad. I won't see my family, but I'll be out afterwards. But he is there, a convicted felon, and $700,000 in debt. So it doesn't matter. What I'm telling you is, it doesn't matter if you are innocent. If you get in their sights, if you do something they don't like and they want to get you, they can get you. It takes a very strong person to stand up against this, and someone who's willing to mortgage the rest of their life, literally. And Snowden knew this, and that's why he did what he did. He said, I'm single, I have no kids, I can do it. I can ruin my life. So, in conclusion, I want to reiterate, the government spying on all of us is rampant. It is totally out of control. We are now 12 and a half years into this. They do not intend to give it up. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and this is as absolute a power as you're going to get over the population. It's just too tantalizing to give it up. This is a grassroots bipartisan issue. Actually, I don't think most people realize this, but the Republican grassroots were more against this from the beginning than the Democrats were. The polls show that. The Democrats have almost caught up, but the Republicans still feel more strongly about it. More of them do. But our Republican leaders have abandoned us. Not all of them, but most of them. And definitely the leadership in the House and the Senate, which has to be changed.
Hear, hear.
And one of the reasons, just on this issue alone, is the Speaker of the House and the leader of the Senate and their minority counterparts have the right to name people to the Intelligence Committee. It's the only committee on the Hill where they have that right. And so what they're doing is they're naming supporters of NSA, almost exclusively. There are very, very few who are not supporters. And then, in addition to having only bad things come out of the intelligence committees, any other bill proposed by anybody else that proposes real reform instead of fake reform that allows more back doors, those bills get routed by the Rules Committee and at the direction of the Speaker and others to bury them. They get referred to 6 different committees or something, and they never see the light of day. So these are major privacy issues, and we have other major privacy issues that are coming up in the states as well. So now we have local police we have to regain control over and stop them from using all this technology against us. We also have things like drones that Jeff is very interested in, trying to get privacy controls on the use of drones so that they can't come over your backyard and, you know, hover over you for hours. And there are all sorts of things like that. But I want, as was said earlier, I want to tell you this is only going to get worse. The technology is advancing. The ability to search these databases will advance. And even now, while they're inefficient at getting terrorists, they're very efficient at getting you. Because all they need is your phone number, your email address, the IP number on your computer. If they have that, they can go for it. So they can do it with their own citizens. It's just that they can't find the terrorists. So for over 12 years now, Big Brother has been watching you, and you have to stop it.
Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to, thank you, Diane. We're going to take a little bit of a break, but you know, there's been a common theme that's been going through today, and that is run, replace, and hold accountable. Every one of you out here could run for a school board position, city council, county commissioner. Hold accountable your state reps. Let them know how you feel. Send them letters, send them faxes, send them emails. Heck, shut down the electronics up there on Capitol Hill. Have an email blast. You know, we can do this, we can organize, we can affect change. So at 2:30, we are going to have Dr. Gordon Fawkes, who's a PhD in physics, and George Taylor, a meteorologist from Oregon State climatologist. So they'll be talking about some very interesting things that I think a lot of people have been led to believe are just so far out there, it's almost alien, but they've got the proof. So come back at 2:30, please.